G'day guys, and welcome to another wedgetail leather tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how to make a simple leather dog collar. In front of you here you'll see I've arrayed some things that you may like to use when you're making your collar. So some of the things that you might need will be a leather strap. I've chosen 1-inch wide Latigo leather. This is a burgundy colour alum tanned leather. It's specifically designed for outdoor gear like saddlery and tack, and also dog collars and leads and things like that as well. So it's perfect for outdoor use where things are going to get a bit wet. You'll need some hardware, so buckle. In this case I've chosen to go with roller buckle style, solid brass hardware. You'll need something to clip your lead onto as well, so a D-ring. This is a solid brass D-ring, no welds. And something to retain the tongue of the strap is nice as well. Not necessary, but nice. You'll need something to mark with, something to punch holes with, and a crew punch would be ideal as well, but if you don't have an oblong or crew punch, then you could always use a normal hole punch and just slice your oblong punch shape. You'll need something to cut with. In this case I use a scalpel. Something to skive the area of the strap where the hardware will be attached would also be good. An optional thing is a strap end punch for finishing the ends. You could also just cut those using a knife. You'll need some rivets. These are brass saddlery rivets, saddler's rivets. They are a number 12. You'll need a rivet setter for the kind of rivets that you use. And just a note on rivets, you don't have to use the brass saddler's rivets. You could use copper saddler's rivets, or you could also use single or double capped rivets as well, whatever your preference. You'll need some glue. You'll need something to finish your edges. So here I've got some just black water-based dye and a rag for burnishing, denim scrap, and I also have some tallow fat inside some denim here, and I'll show you how to use that later to help slick down your edges as well. And you'll need a hammer so you can whack stuff. Alright, I also have here an edger. You can use that optionally to round over the corners of your edges, and it will make your strap a bit more comfortable in the hand, or around the dog's neck as well. Alright, let's get started. Okay, so just a quick note on the sizing of your belt straps that you'll be cutting for the collars. When I'm looking at hardware, I usually allow a turnback that is equal to each of the pieces of hardware that I'm including plus 1 inch as well. So in this case I have 3 pieces of hardware plus 1 inch would make a 4-inch turnback, and so that's the end of the strap that I would skive down to half thickness. But I also want to skive down the next 4 inches, or a little bit shy of that, where this turnback will be folded over, so that the whole thing can be reduced in thickness and make it a little bit lighter weight, less bulky around the dog's neck. It's the same principle with belts. Depending on whether you're using rivets or stitching would vary the size of the spacing that you need to leave between your hardware. But in this case, I find for me a rule of thumb about 1 inch per piece of hardware is enough space for me to put my hardware in and put a rivet in between. So as that folds back, you would see that there's sufficient space for a rivet in between. What that means for me is with my 3 pieces of hardware and a 4-inch turnback, I've got an 8-inch section that I'm going to skive, and then I also need to have a think about how much tongue I need on the end of my collar so that I can get it to pass through the buckle, through the D-ring and through the keeper, and still have something to take purchase with. So in this case, since I have about 4 inches here, then the tongue end, before I start punching holes, would need to be 4 inches long as well. So my first hole would be at 4 inches from the tongue. We'll get to that in a bit, but for now, let's get started with the first process, which is we're going to bevel the edges on our large strap. Alright guys, so as we look down the bench top here, we can see I've got a nice long strap. This strap is about 6 foot in length actually, so it's quite a bit longer than my bench top. You've got a couple of options when you're making your collars and things, collars and leads. In this case, this strap will be cut down into smaller sections for making collars, but I find that it's typically easier, rather than cutting out 4 sections and then beveling 4 sections for the number of collars that I'll get out of a strap. It's sometimes easier to just bevel the whole strap first and finish the edges first with the burnishing and the dyeing, so that when I then move on to my next process, I don't have to worry about doing this for each thing. The plus side to that is it's faster. The downside to that is that when I've finished doing this activity, then I need to do the same activity again for all of the ends that I cut. So to each their own. In this case, I'm going to start with beveling the edges of my strap. So pretty simply, you just want to lay your strap out on your bench top and take an edge beveler. This one is a number 2 from Tandy. And the first thing I always like to do before I start beveling edges is give it a strop. So here we just have a scrap piece of leather with some jeweler's rouge on it, which is a polishing compound. Just give it a good strop. Make sure that the cutting edge is nice and strong, nice and sharp, and then we can cut away. You want to avoid pushing too hard, that you slide off the edge of your leather and then skip across and mark the surface. Instead, just apply gentle but firm pressure and try and maintain a fairly constant angle. Alright, so we're going to do that for both grain side edges and also both flesh side edges. Now you may be thinking, oh but Scotty, what happens when I make my turnback? Won't the beveled edges be an eyesore? Won't they be in the way? But no, because we're going to skive our turnback, we'll actually be cutting away and skiving back the section that's been beveled anyway. See my blade's starting to skip a little bit, so I'll just give it another strop. Make sure it's a nice cutting edge. There we go. So you'll also notice that the flesh side can be a little bit harder to bevel sometimes, just because it's a bit softer, and the grain, or the corium is what it actually is less tight, less firm. So you can see in a strong section of the back, the flesh side is a lot easier going than towards the outside edges of where the hide would have been, which are quite soft and squishy. Now the other thing that you'll notice here is I've got a really nice long 6-foot strap. Why the hell would I be slicing this down into smaller sized collars? Why wouldn't I be using this for a dog lead or something else where I need that length of strap? Actually, along this strap there are a number of flaws. We can see here, this is a section of the strap that has some sort of gouge in it. You can see the dye penetrating through here and here as well on that edge. I'll put that in camera for you. So this section here will actually be wastage because I won't be able to make anything out of that, because this would be a weakness in my finished product. There's a couple others like that along the way down here, so I'm just going to try and take what I can out of this strap and use it for my collars. Alright. So there we go, that's all done. Just get rid of all this, I don't know what you call this stuff. I haven't found a good purpose for it yet either. Alright, so that's the strap beveled, both sides. The next thing that we can do is we could carry along and dye the edge of this whole strap, and then we can burnish that edge as well. And the reason again why I'm doing that now is just because it's easier while it's in one big piece. So to do that, we have our stain. Now this is just a water-based dye, an EcoFlow dye. I'm just going to grab a rubber glove so I don't get dye all over my hands. And inside this pot, what I have is a stain mop. And this stain mop is pretty simply just an end of a pencil that I've cut off. And I've wrapped a piece of denim around it, though some flannelette style blanket or something like that maybe would be a bit more effective at soaking up dye. And then it's just tied on with twine. So if I carry that over here, you can have a look at this stain mop. Tied on with a bit of the waxed thread from one of my spools. Really easy to make, but it holds a good amount of dye. You can see it's not dripping too much either. So all I want to do with this is come along the edge and just rub that dye in. So this will be doing two things for me. It'll be dyeing the edge, and it'll also, because it's a denim, be giving it a slight burnish, which is good. Soak up a bit more dye. So this latigo can also be a little bit thirsty sometimes. It wants to take on a fair amount of dye. It's not a bad thing. And the stain colour that I'm using here is just black. I'm okay with that being a contrasting colour, because when it's burnished up, your edges should be fairly dark anyway, if it's burnished well. So you can see this is a pretty quick process compared to trying to use a cotton tip or cotton bud or whatever you want to call them. And it's a lot cleaner than trying to use a wool dauber as well. Now I'm at the section down the end here which I said was going to be scrap as well, so I'm just going to overlap this a little bit and call that done, and then come back down the other side. I'll come back to you when the other side's done. Okay guys, so we've stained both sides now, and the next thing that we want to do is put on a little bit of a burnish onto these edges. So I'm just going to do this the real quick and easy way. If you like, you could use a burnishing stick, or if you don't have one, you could use the edge of your beveler or one of those things to just give it a little bit of shine all the way down. Another way to do it very quickly for a big long strap like this is to use your piece of canvas, and you literally just grab it and apply a good amount of pressure and pull it through like that. And this will build up some friction heat and compress the fibres along the edges. Okay, so just from doing that, you can see that that edge is building up a nice shine and compressing those fibres down neatly on both sides. Okay. Note that I'm doing this while the leather is wet from the stain, and that's another reason why I like to use the water-based stain, is because I find that water, rather than the oil-based stains, tends to provide a better burnishing point for me. Okay, so that's that one end done. Now we'll move down to this end. As far as you can move down. Now, you'll note I'm using a denim scrap. This would also work with canvas. Just be a little bit cautious that if you're using natural edges, denim or canvas may actually leach their colour. So the blue denim, for example, if I was using just a natural sort of flesh-coloured leather, that blue denim dye could actually soak into, or could coat the edge then and discolour it, and that would be no good. So there we go, this one's actually burnished up really nice and smoothly. Very quick burnish on it actually, which is lovely, and that looks quite nice. It's very acceptable. If you want to, you can go over it again with your rubbing stick, just to make sure it's all nicely laid down. And the last step that I would do here usually is finish it with some beeswax as well. Instead of beeswax, if you like, you could use gum tragacanth or one of those other burnishing agents. I don't know if you can see what I can see from your angle, but this is getting a really nice sheen into it. Now what burnishing does is it compresses the fibres down along the edge of the leather, and in doing so it stops a lot of moisture and dirt, earth, from getting into those edges. And of course those are the things, moisture and dirt, or also earth, that break down your leather very quickly. So the more you can prevent that from getting in the sides, the longer your leather item should last. The other reason why I like burnishing over edge paints wherever possible is edge paints will create a good seal, but when they crack, there's no way that you can repair them other than to just repaint them. Whereas with a burnished edge, anybody with a piece of scrap denim could refinish that edge and protect their leather item. So for longevity out in the field or in the bush somewhere, if you're using your straps for bushcraft or something like that, a burnished edge is always going to be better than a painted one. There you go. As I mentioned, the next step that I would do here would be to coat the edge in some beeswax. I have just a little piece of beeswax here. So I'll go along and just rub that along these edges again, all over. Give it another once over with my burnishing rag, and I'll come back when we're done. Now, another problem that you might come across from time to time is burnishing your edges here. You may end up with some fuzzy bits that you just can't get to stick down. No matter how much you burnish over them or use your cloth or whatever, you may not be able to get them to stick down. And one of the ways that you can deal with that is to use one of these. So we take a piece of denim, and inside that denim we've put some tallow fat. So tallow fat is literally just reduced fat with all the meat and stuff removed. In Australia we buy it in the supermarket under a product called Super Fry, and it works pretty good. So it's tallow fat in denim, and what we do with that is we take a lighter, cigarette lighter, just give it a gentle heat. Doesn't need to be aggressive, just give it a nice gentle heat. Then we can take that strip and rub that over our leather. And what that's going to do is it's going to put some fat back into the leather. Okay, now that that's done, I'm pretty happy that it should work all right. I can put my tallow fat back away and continue burnishing just as I normally would, either with a rubbing stick or with my canvas cloth or denim cloth. So when we're all done, your edges should look a little something like this. Smooth, shiny, soft in the hand. Feels nice in the hand, which means it'll be comfortable around your dog's neck. Or if you were making a dog lead, for example, it'll be good to carry. Okay guys, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to figure out what the size of our collar is. Obviously, if you know the size of collar that you need to make, then you need to pick a piece of leather that's going to be long enough to make that length, plus your turnback and the tongue length. In this case here, the strip that I have here is a total of about 26 inches long, pretty much 26 inches on the button. So 26 inches long minus 4 inches for my turnback and 4 inches for my tongue makes this about 18 inches. So that means that the maximum size of this particular collar will be 18 inches. And then I'll be able to fit anywhere from 18 down to about 14 is where I'll be running my holes. So, with that in mind, I need to neaten up my ends here, and I don't want to waste anything if I can avoid it. So we're just going to take off the absolute bare minimum that we need to. to make this a nice neat strap end. There we go. That'll round up nicely. And the other thing that I'm going to look at is which end of my strap do I want to be my turnback and which one do I want to be the tongue. So if I look at this particular piece of leather, what I can see is that I've got a nice firm flesh side here. Here's my grain side and here's my flesh side. I've got no ugly looking marks on the grain side and I've got a nice firm flesh side. Whereas on the other end of the strap here, it's a little bit soft and spongy, okay, and that's because this part's come from the outside edge of the hide. So this edge is the one that I would want to use as my turnback because it's not so pretty and because it's not so strong, which means that my tongue end will last a whole lot longer than this would with repetitive use. Right, let's cut the tip on the tongue end now. Beautiful. A little bit more. Alright. So we'll check our measurements again. This has come right out on 26 inches on the button. Now my first hole is going to be at 18 inches, and my turnback's going to be 4 inches. So the start of my turnback will be 22 inches. This will be the center of where my crew punch goes. But I'll actually carry my turnback all the way down to the 18 inch mark. And the reason that I want to do that is so that it sits flatter. So what I'll do is I'll take this and I will measure from 26 down to 18. So I'll take a little marking gauge here and just make a mark there. And that is where I would want to start skiving from. Now, if you have one, you can use a bench-mounted strap skiver. I do, but for now, I'll show you how to use one of these. So here I've got just a standard super skiver from Craft Tool, and I'm just going to give that a little strop, just to make sure that that razor is nice and sharp. And then we find where we marked our skiving point, and all we do is give it a good drag. Okay, so what you want to do is try and make sure that you come in fairly consistently on both sides and in the center. Okay, and cut away some of that excess. If you have one, it's good to do this on a nice smooth surface like a marble or a granite slab, just to make sure that you don't dig into your mat on the other side. Now when you get down towards the end here, it's also a good idea as you're skiving the thickness to make this just a tiny bit thinner. You don't want it super thin because it needs to be strong still, but just making that a little bit thinner will make it a little bit more seamless at the other end. Okay. So that's the basic way to skive a strap down. And all you want to do is have a look at that and see when you're about half thickness, and as it turns out, that's about right there. For my other straps that I'm going to cut today, I'll be using my strap skiving bench-mounted strap skiver. Just because it's a lot quicker and more consistent. And that's one of those things. Use the tools you've got, but if you can find something that you do quite a lot, and you can find a tool that would make you a lot more efficient at that, that tool may be worth investing in. Okay, so as I've skived that down, you can see what I was mentioning earlier. This edge is still nice and burnished, and when I fold that back over on my turnback, I actually don't have to come back in here and re-burnish that edge now. So it's already done, and because I've skived it, these two edges will sit nice and flat together, whereas if they were rounded, you would have a ridge in between. So that's why I bevel and burnish the edges of my straps in one go. Let's measure out the midpoint of our turnback, which is at 22 inches. We'll just take our scratch awl and put a mark there. Now that point there is where we're going to be centering our crew punch. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I have a crew punch here, which is an oblong shaped punch, and if I wanted to, I could come in here and punch that right now. But just for your convenience today, I'm going to show you how you can do that with just a regular hole punch and a scalpel. So what we want to do is figure out the size that we want. In this case, what have I got here? It's about a 1 inch crew punch. So we would take our little ruler and go about 1/2 inch from the center point there on either side. Just make a mark. I'm just going to do that with my scalpel. So we make a mark 1/2 inch either side of our center point. Then we can take a hole punch, place it so that the outside edge of the hole punch is on the point that we just marked, and the inside point is towards the center. And then we can go ahead and punch that out. One more. Okay, and the same with the other side. Trying to make sure as well that we're centered. Oops. There we go. So we've cut our 2 holes here now. The next thing that we need to do is just join them up, and that will create our oblong shaped hole. So we'll take a ruler, line up the tops of those 2 punched circles there and use them as a termination. So we can just cut straight along. There. Do the same on the other side here. Always be careful when using knives. Especially scalpels, they're very sharp. Okay, so that's cut my oblong shape, and then if I haven't cut all the way through, just come in from the back with your scalpel a little bit and clean up the edges that you didn't cut out. Voila. Okay guys, so now that we've cut our oblong shaped hole here, one of the things that we may like to do is again come back just with a cotton tip and dye the inside of that hole. We may also want to burnish that really quickly. And the reason again why you want to do that is just because that's going to be a point where you're going to have a fair amount of wear, and being a dog collar, it'll be outside in the weather, so you may want to have a bit of protection in there against water, rain, dirt, mud, all that kind of stuff. So just quickly I'll do that, and then we'll come back and start looking at fitting the hardware. Okay, and so if you're trying to burnish on the inside of your crew punch hole here, a pencil or something like that is a really easy way to get in there and do that if you don't have a proper burnishing stick or something like that. This will do a good job. voila. Right, and all that's going to do is just help to protect that from all the dirt and water. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is go ahead and fit our buckle. Now what we want to do is we want to make sure that the buckle head is pointing down, and then we feed that through so that when the buckle head comes up, it is the right way. That way our collar will be in the correct orientation. So the next thing that we want to do now is, once we've fitted our buckle, we would like to go ahead and set some glue in here. We're then going to go ahead and attach our hardware. So what I have here is just some contact cement. It's a leather glue, Tanner's Bond. But there's a range of other glues you could use for this if you like. Just go ahead and apply the glue fairly liberally. Try and do this in a fairly well ventilated area because it is a bit stinky. Now the glue as well, I don't mind putting that up over the inside of the buckle there. You could stain and burnish this as well if you like. Again, just to help prevent that moisture getting in throughout the life of the collar. But the glue here will actually help to seal it down as well. You see, I've not been stingy with glue or dye throughout any of these processes. It doesn't pay to be. So again, if we wanted to give that a light burnish in here, we could as well. All you've got to do is take that off. Maybe use some dye. And a cotton tip maybe. Just the areas that aren't glued, you could apply the dye to that. This is just to moisten it down a little bit. Glue will seal the rest. Okay. Bit of dye in there, and then hit it with a rubbing stick. Just to compress those fibres down. Voila. Okay. So again, we'll fit our buckle back in. And wait. Rookie mistake. Alright, so now we're ready to start looking at fitting our hardware. So the first thing that I'm going to put in is my D-ring. And then I'm going to put on my keeper. So make sure that our buckle's in the correct orientation. Don't want to create that boo-boo at this point. Flip it over. Grab your whacking stick. And your hole punch. Now, I've got the hole punch here set for the size of copper rivet that I'm using. What we want to do is find roughly the center, fairly close to, but not right on top of that join, because we need some space for the rivet and the burr to sort of flare out. So where that burr is going to sit, we need it to be close, but not pushing hard up against this, otherwise it'll dig in too much. Okay. So we choose where we want it, give it a good whack. There we are. And on the back side we should be fairly close to the center as well. And we can take our rivet, plonk that through, take our burr, put that on top. We grab our rivet setter, and inside our rivet setter here we actually have a hole there to place over the top of the rivet, and we can give that a bit of a whack down, and that's nice and firm. Now I notice one thing that I've omitted from my itinerary. Trimmed. Maybe wear some safety glasses if you're doing this at home. Alright, so once that's trimmed, we take our domed end of the rivet setter, plonk that on here, give it a good tap. That just domes the end over a little bit. Then we can take our ball peen hammer, and I'm just using the end of that, or you could use a regular hammer face, just to round that over. If you find it's not riveting in firm enough, just make sure you place a little anvil underneath your rivet. There we go. So that's our first one set in. Now we can apply our second rivet. So here we would slide down our hardware into the position that we want it, fairly close up to that first one. Maybe a little bit further down. Stick our glue down again so that it's held relatively firm in place. Making sure the edges of the collar are lined up. Then we go ahead and we make our second mark. Always feel around the edges of these just to make sure that there's no rough edges either. That's two. Now for the third and final. Slide it down into place. Now from here, we want to make sure that we're going through the center of this end here. So what we'll do is we'll actually come through from the back this time. And just as we're coming through, we'll make sure we're lined up in the center, which we pretty well are. Too shabby. Now we can fit our last rivet and burr. And there we have it. So that is the collar end, the buckle end. Now we've got the tongue end. So what we need to do now is measure where our holes are going. So our first hole, as we mentioned, will be at about 4 inches, and that's so that when we come through the buckle, we can fix through the keeper. Okay, so to do that, we need to make sure that our first hole here is about 4 inches. Now, I can mark that now and see for sure. Yeah, that first hole would be at about 3.5 inches to make its way through the keeper. So, we'll come down 4 inches, and this time I'm going to switch to a slightly larger hole punch. And the reason I'm switching to a slightly larger hole punch is just so that I can fit the tip of the buckle through. Now we'll take our measurements. So I need 4 inches. 1, 2, 3, 4. Roughly in the center. Now for a collar this size, I'm going to do holes every inch. Okay, for a total of 5 holes. Alright, bring that back over to our hole punch. Make sure we seam fairly well centered. Give it a good whack. Again, try and keep it in a straight up and down, not too far forward, not too far back. Have a look from different sides and make sure you're on target, and then send it. And we end up with a nice neat hole, fairly centered on the back as well. Repeat process times 5. There we are. So that's pretty well assembled. The last thing that we want to do is just come in, and with my rivet holes there, they're a bit rough, so I'm just going to knock them down. Sorry, my punch holes there. Just knock them down so that they lay nice and flat. And the other thing that I want to do is finish off this tip here, dye these holes and give them a quick burnish if I can. And also this tip here needs burnishing as well. That'll be the entire thing sealed then, which is exactly what we want. So, to do that, again, take our dye, just a cotton tip should do fine, nice and liberal coming in from the front to be fairly neat. There we go. You can see we've been fairly neat, so we don't have any bleed through on the back nor on the front. And then do our tip. Which I've just noticed needs bevelling. So we'll do that as well. Top and bottom. And then lastly, do the tip at the buckle end. Being careful not to get dye on the rest of your project there. Okay. Now to burnish these ends, it's fairly straightforward. We just continue the process that we did before. Using our canvas, get a nice burnish on that tip end. And you can see all we need is pressure and a bit of friction and heat. And you're going to get a nice smooth end on that. You can then take your beeswax and finish it. And that'll be protected for a good long time. The next thing was the hole punches. So as we saw before, we could use a pencil for that. Get inside the hole punch, give it a good twist. Try and work it around all the sides. Okay, and I can see inside there, that looks nicely burnished. So we do the same thing from the back. And then you say, all right, Scotty, you wise guy, how are you going to burnish this piece here now? Well, for that, I'm going to put it over the edge of our bench top so we've got a nice firm surface. We're going to take our canvas cloth and just use the bench top to press against as we build up some heat and friction on that seam, on that edge. Give it a bit of beeswax. And finish it off. That's it. One completed dog collar. Now, if you like, if you've got a logo or something like that, you could punch that in here now as well. For me, it's the symbol of the wedge-tailed eagle. There we are. Well, that wraps up this tutorial, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got some value from today, and I hope you enjoy making your own leather dog collars. If you'd like to buy a collar like this, you can always head over to my web store. I'll put the link in the description down below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and like it, maybe subscribe to my channel as well. And if you have any comments or suggestions, put them in the comment section down below. Thanks for stopping by.